Today's tutorial is a fun one. I want to show you how to integrate an AI text box similar to a ChatGPT into your website for free. We're going to build it using a .NET Core MVC application, but you can follow these steps even if you're in another framework. And again, I think the big thing here is that we're going to do this at no cost to you. So again, what are we building? I want to show this real quick. It's not a complete website full of features. This is just going to show you how to integrate this into your site, and again at no cost. And so we just have a text box here, and you can ask it whatever question you want. Click a button and get a response. Now you're going to notice my response has a little bit of personality in it, and I'm going to show you how to add that little flair just for fun. And of course, you might not call your button the sucker button, but I like calling my buttons sucker buttons. Anyways, this is what we're building. It's a simple interface. It's, however, very useful because AI is all the rage. AI is all the hype. You might want to know how to build this into your website. So that's what we're building. Now, what software am I going to use? I'm going to use Visual Studio Community. And again, it's because of the framework that we're using, .NET Core MVC. Go ahead, download Visual Studio Community. I'll go ahead and walk through this process real quick. Once you download the installer, I'm going to show you what options you will select in order to have the correct templates. Now I already have this installed, so I'm not going to follow this entire process, but just to show you to get you started. So once you launch that installer, the checkbox that we're going to check for this installation is simply the ASP.NET and web development checkbox. That's going to give you all the tools that you need to install and follow along in this example. So Visual Studio Community is the answer to what software I'm going to be using to build this out. Now, before I build this out, why I'm able to do this for free is a little bit of a discussion around ChatGPT, which the company that made ChatGPT, as you probably know, is OpenAI. And what's funny about the name OpenAI is it's no longer open source, and so it is closed source, which means developers cannot contribute it, nor can they see the source code. So ChatGPT, when I've made this kind of project in the past, I've used ChatGPT. And if you get into the developer quick start, you're going to find pretty quickly, at least I found, that you had to pay for access to this. And so, that's a barrier, of course. And so I wanted to figure out a way, and I've found out a way, to make this barrier go away and not have to pay to get started using these AI tools. Now, ChatGPT, I had to pay for access to the API. Versus Llama in Llama 3.1. Now Llama, as you may or may not know, Llama is made by Meta. And so this is a competitor. Of course, ChatGPT kind of burst on the scene, made a bunch of waves in the tech community. Now everyone's developing their own large language model, LLM. Llama is Meta's LLM. And literally 7 days ago, Llama introduced version 3.1. And what's great about 3.1, and you can kind of go down to the benchmarks, you can see that 3.1 is competitive with leading models across a range of tasks, including GPT-4 and 4.0. And so Model 3.1 was a big performance boost to the open source community. And I was kind of hoping that it would beat even the closed source models, but you can kind of look at the numbers and make that determination for yourself. If you're just looking at these numbers, I see 88.6 versus 85 for GPT-4, but 88.7 for GPT Omni. And so Again, it's competitive, and it's going to be made free. Now, if you kind of look into Llama 3.1, you quickly find that you need to like download Llama and like use it on your local system. Like you need a way to run it. And you know, again, you can go through the documentation, and in here to get started with Llama, you know, you can download Llama on Hugging Face. And so that's not what I'm looking for. Like I'm looking for an API endpoint where I can just use Llama on the back end. And it's thanks to this podcast that I listen to. This is my favorite podcast. I've listened to this literally since COVID 2020, which is when this podcast came out. I don't know if I was quite there for episode 1. This is a great podcast of 4 guys that are about a generation older than I am. And so they've been in Silicon Valley since the early days of the internet. And so I learned about this company called Groq. And Groq, if you go to Groq.com, Groq is a company that Chamath here that I'm, let's see if I can point to Chamath here. And so here we go. There's Chamath. Chamath Palihapitiya is, they call themselves the besties. And so he's, of the 4, you know, he's one of my favorite besties. I'd probably put David Freeberg as my favorite. Nonetheless, Chamath is a great tech guru to kind of listen to. And Chamath is plugged into this industry, the AI industry, and he's an investor. And he's invested in this company called Groq. And so from listening to Chamath, I kind of learned about Groq. And you can see here, Groq is fast AI inference. And so you can ask Groq, what is AI inference? And this is kind of part of the explanation of this tool that we're going to use, that is Groq, to understand AI inference. AI inference is the step where you take a trained model and use it to make decisions or generate insights in real-world applications. And so what I find a little interesting is that you can ask AI the same questions and just get a slightly different answer each time. AI inference is the process of applying the knowledge learned from the training data to make decisions on new inputs. And so inference, as I view it, is kind of like the last step of getting the answer to the questions that you ask. And so what's behind Groq are the models. What's behind Groq is the processing power. All of the, I believe they're H100s, are the machines that can actually process the request and efficiently give you an answer. But anyways, Groq provides fast AI inference, which is kind of like the last step in the process to giving you the answer to the question. And so that kind of goes back to our PowerPoint here, you know, why we're using Llama. And I already jumped ahead and answered kind of what is Groq. Groq is AI inference, which kind of gives you the API. Basically, Groq is going to give us access to an API where we can give it an input and it'll give us a response. And that's why we're going to use Groq. And then what we're going to do is we're going to obtain an API key from Groq, and then we're going to do a live build of the application. And so that's what's coming. And so let's go ahead and close this PowerPoint. Let's obtain an API key. Now you go to Groq.com. To obtain your API key, you need to make an account. You could see I'm logged in. You should be able to, you know, like any website you ever use, register for a new account and log in with that account. So I'm not going to walk through that step here. Go ahead and register an account on Groq, and this is going to give you developer access to that API key. And so once you've made that account, logged in, you're going to click on here, Developer Playground, and simply API keys. And then you're going to create an API key. You just give it a name, and it's going to tell you as soon as you click submit, here is your key copy this key now and save it, because it's not going to show you that key again. And so you can kind of see here, the secret key is a secret, therefore they don't make it accessible. So, you can kind of hold off on this step until we actually get into building the application, because, I just want to show you how to generate an API key using Groq. That's going to give you access to that API. Okay, now let's go ahead with the last step and let's build this. Again, this is Visual Studio Community, the latest version, 2022. I'm going to create a new project. And what you're going to select from this project is you're going to select C# and you're going to select Web in this dropdown. And that's going to give you this ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. And so I'll walk through Model View Controller and how this works. I'll explain some of the basics and how this architecture works as I walk through it. This is a little bit unique because a lot of developers on the web are using JavaScript and the MERN stack and the mean stack. Not as many developers are doing this, and I'll prove this, bringing in this AI tools in the Microsoft world, in the .NET world. And so this is a unique framework to code this up on. Nonetheless, ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller, and we're going to give this project name. You decide where you want to save it, and I'll just say this AI integration. Right, you call this what you want, but my project will be called AI integration, and it's going to be on my local C drive. And let's go ahead and spin this up. We're not going to worry about any sort of authentication or user accounts or anything here. We're not going to worry about how we're going to. This is a small app. Okay, now the first thing to bring in Groq into this project is we are going to jump right into our package manager, and we're going to install a package that's going to allow us to interface with our API. And so if you just search for Groq, now there's a little bit of confusion, I think, very common. Groq with a Q versus Groq with a K. Groq with a K is Twitter's AI. So what Meta calls Llama, which is the large language model, Groq with a K is Twitter X. It's their large language model. So Groq with a Q versus Groq with a K. Haven't dug into it. I think there is, if you know what Groq is, please let me know. I think there's some lore behind that name to a movie and a book, Spaceship Odyssey. Again, forgive me, I don't know the lore. But I want to point this out, that this package that I'm using only has 1,000 downloads. And so in terms of like popular packages, you could see not a lot of people are bringing in Groq to use Meta's Llama. It's only got 1,000 downloads, and I'm about 5 of them because I've done this several times now, just tinkering and having fun. And so this package is not, again, I kind of mentioned this is a little bit unique on the approach that I'm bringing in here. And so, get that green check mark. We're bringing in Groq Sharp. That's going to allow us to use Llama 3.1 on the back end. So I'm going to close and close. Whoop, cancel. Now that interview, I'm going to save. Okay. Now in Solution Explorer, we've got a settings file. And so this is where our API key is going to go eventually. And then we also have our program CS. And so this is where we kind of spin up our web application. And you can kind of see here that we're making this builder, adding services to the builder, spinning up a web application, using some routing and some authorization and some Okay, so this is basically launching the web application. If you kind of look at this program CS, and this is where we're going to start. Actually, let's start. I changed my mind. Let's start in the app settings. This app settings is going to be where you're going to save your API key. Again, it's not best practice to store your keys directly in the program files. It's best to store your keys in the settings file. So I am going to add a comma here, and again, I would encourage you to follow along. And this is going to be where I use, where I create a variable to store my API key. Now, my API key is going to be deleted after this tutorial. So I'm comfortable sharing my secret, because even if you wanted to use my API key, you're not going to be able to. I'm going to recreate my API key. But when I generated my API key, this is the string that it gave me. I'm going to save that. And all we're doing here is we're creating a variable called API key, and we're storing my key that's going to allow access to that API that has artificial intelligence on the back end that we're going to be using. Now that we've created this variable in our settings file, we can go ahead and close that. And in our program.cs, there's basically 3 lines that I'm going to bring in, and I'm going to put these 3 lines after line 6. So notice on line 6, we're creating this variable called app. Oh, I take that back. I'm going to put it after line 4. All right, so after line 4, because all I need is builder. All right, I'm making 2 variables. My first variable is to grab my API key. So line 8 grabs my API key out of my settings file and stores it in this lowercase API key, right, on line 8. So I make a variable, and I read that variable. And then line 9, again, you're going to have to code this by hand, or I'll make this available on GitHub, right? I'll put the GitHub repo in the description, okay? So if you don't want to manually type all this out, you don't have to. Line 9, you're going to notice I'm using Llama 3.1. So my API model is Llama 3.1. This is awesome. This came out a week ago. Okay, so we are using the latest iteration of Llama that's open source. And here on line 12, you're going to see a lot of methods being called to kind of configure a Groq client. Okay, and so let me explain a little bit. This is what's called dependency injection. And so dependency injection takes this services container, and this services container will construct objects for us in C#. And so at runtime, whenever an object is needed to be passed into a controller, the services container can actually instantiate our objects and inject our objects into our controllers. And so we are adding this iGroq client interface using dependency injection so that you can use this object in our controllers. Okay, and these are all settings. To understand these particular settings, you would have to dive a little bit deeper into the playground for Groq Cloud, and you can kind of come into here and change settings and see how you get a different performance as you modify these settings. But nonetheless, these are settings that work. And again, what we've done here is we've essentially we're making it possible to create objects that call methods that are of this type iGroq client. And so of course this iGroq client is configured with our API key and our model, which is Llama 3.1. Okay, so that's the explanation behind basically the configuration of getting a application, an MVC application to tie into Groq. All right, so we'll close that. Okay, now what we need to do now is basically provide that interface, that front end for the user to type you know, a prompt into a text box. And so if you were to spin this up right now, you just see a template landing page. And so that's the index CSS HTML that we're about to look at. That's showing us our landing page as this spins. You know, this is just an MVC typical landing page, and it says AI integration in the corner. Okay, but I'm just going to replace this with our form. And all our form is, we're going to use some bootstrap controls. And so it's an HTML form that's going to respond to, it's going to have mobile responsiveness. Okay, so it's going to look good, you know, it's going to look good on a mobile device or a tablet or what have you. And so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this div, and I'm going to bring in a form tag, and I'm going to explain this. Now this is a whole lot of code that I just copied and pasted, but let me explain, and feel free, again, you can type this out or pull from my repo, copy and paste from my repo, but nonetheless what I'm looking at here is these classes. So if I look at the classes here, okay, the class on my form, the class on my input control, the class on my button, these are all Bootstrap classes. And so this is just styling, Bootstrap styling, if you will. So form floating, I like floating controls. That's just my preference. If you go to getbootstrap.com, you can kind of see floating controls on our forms. I just think kind of condense the interface down, where you put the label inside. Yeah, there it is. You put the label right inside of the text box, right? This is kind of a cool and modern way, if you ask me, to do forms. So I like floating labels. So that's what I've got here. And by doing these classes, that's what we're going to end up with. Of course, our input is a text box with an ID of floating input value. It doesn't really matter what you call this. This is just kind of a default ID from Bootstrap docs. So didn't even really put any thought into that. The placeholder text will say ask your question. Then it says the value is kind of like the default value that the user asks. I'll take the default value out. You can, and then the name of question, right? So this is the name attribute on the input. Okay, which I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to explain why you have to have a name attribute. And then we have our label, which you kind of saw how the label will look on the text box. Then we have a submit button type of submit. Of course, this is going to submit the form. And we're going to post this data to the index method on our controller. And so if I just kind of spin that up after I explain those form tags, again, not the most impressive interface in the world, but then again, that's all Google was a text box and a button. So they don't have to be complex. And this is where it's at, right? We got our little text box, but it doesn't do anything yet, right? So, and our little label says the AI knows mostly everything except when it's spinning tall tales. So keep in mind, if you're familiar with these systems or not, some percentage of the time, large language models are just wrong. Okay, it's known as hallucinations. Hallucinations happen depending. They're trying to be eliminated, so they're trying to. The industry is trying to get rid of hallucinations, but just keep in mind, these are not perfect. They're pretty good. They're very good. They're great, but they're not perfect. Okay, so sometimes those AI systems can tell some tall tales. So that's our front end right now. Now, then let's go to the controller. So let's kind of bring up this controller. Okay, now this index, right, has our HTML in it, but of course a request comes into the home controller before that the controller sends the view to the end user. This is kind of like the starting point of the application, right? So this starting point simply, sends out the view, the index.cshtml. That's how MVC works out of the box, is it kind of has a starting point. And so this index method returns the index.cshtml inside of the home folder because we're in the home controller. That's how MVC works. Again, those are just kind of the that's how MVC works. I don't know how else to say it. But now, in my home controller, I have to make a method to post to. So I'm going to have this little attribute that is a HTTP post. If you wanted to mark this as an HTTP GET, it's kind of implied, not necessary, but I'm going to make a post to the index. Now, my index is going to work with my index. I'm going to code this instead of just copy and paste. It's going to work with asynchronous methods. Because of that, I need to mark this index as async. Therefore, it's going to return a task of type I action result. It's going to be called index, and it's going to take a question from the form. And remember how I said the name attribute is important. This name attribute is going to bind to the string question on the post. And so this is model binding, and this is one way of binding. In other words, you're going to send the value out of this input into this string called question. And so this is where I have a little fun. I say, okay, I'm going to take that question and I'm going to do, this is kind of fun. I am just having fun here, and I'm going to concatenate my question with a little more. So whatever the user asks, I'm just going to append like a period, or I'm going to say, please answer in 50 characters or less. And so, these AI systems, they can be a little wordy, and so go ahead and summarize it in 50 characters or less. And as a shout out to Chamath Palihapitiya, I'm going to say, please answer 50 characters or less with a Chamath Palihapitiya impersonation. And so Chamath is a highly articulate person. That's one of the things I love about this podcast, is they can explain things so clearly to me. So shout out to Chamath, and I'm going to make my AI application sound like Chamath, my answer. Now, I'm going to let's bring in a using statement. Now I'm going to call in using Groq sharp, okay? And I'm going to pass in, using that dependency injection, that object. So here we go, private iGroq client called _Groq client. On the constructor of my home controller, this is where the dependency injection comes in. We can say iGroq client called Groq client, and then _Groq client equals Groq client. So this is where dependency injection happens. That services container will pass in my Groq client object, and then we'll initialize my instance field right here. So line 11 gets initialized on line 16. Now at that point we have _Groq client, which we can use to send our API. So here I'm going to say string answer equals, we're going to await our underscore Groq client dot, and you're going to see the methods. We got get structured chat completion async. So clearly we've got some chat methods. You can, again, you can look through these different methods and see how they all vary. I'm going to create chat completion async. So that's the method call. And we need to send it a message in an object. So I'm going to pass a new Groq sharp models message object initializer where the content equals the question. Okay, so again, here's our method call, right? There's our method call. Here's how we pass the question in, right? The content equals the question. I'm going to store the answer in what's known as viewBag. And viewBag is just a way of sending data from the controller to the view. Okay, so it's a dynamic property called viewBag. You get to make up the name here. So viewBag.answer. You get to make up that variable name and store the answer that we're getting as a response from our method call. And then I'm just going to return to the view. Okay, so there's our post. I'm going to put in a breakpoint right here. I'll step through my code so you can kind of see how it's going to work. The last thing to do is to go back to my index file, and I'm going to say, hey, if there's a viewBag.answer, so here's a razor syntax at block. If there's a viewBag answer is not null, then let's just have a little div with some styling on it that displays that answer. Pretty simple markup using some Bootstrap. Again, I think all the code is pretty simplified. I think this is going to work. Wouldn't be my first mistake if I did in fact introduce a mistake. I will troubleshoot and fix it. And so I will ask my AI, what year did the Matrix come out? And as I hit my breakpoint, notice my line 28 is hitting my breakpoint. I'm going to hover over the question. My question did get passed through from that form, so that's a really good first step. If I step into, let's see if I got an answer. My answer did come back from my Groq client. I'm storing that answer in the viewBag, and if I hit the continue button and go back to my front end, okay, we hit this error. Let me fix this. Can't do it without an error, right? If you experienced that error as I did, all I did to fix it was I just closed the application and I relaunched it, and it was not a problem with the code. I think sometimes the hot reload works well depending on the code that you change. I might have coded too much and the hot reload can't handle it, so that's very normal, happens all the time. You just got to stop it all. And let's do one more demonstration of my application. And again, it's acting as Chamath Palihapitiya. So what year was the Matrix released? And I don't know, good impersonation or not. All right, listen up, the Matrix dropped in 1999, folks. Game changer, mind-blowing, still holds up today. What is the meaning of life? Make money, have kids, die. Now go build something. And gotta love Chamath. He's absolutely a proponent of work and working hard, even as a billionaire. How much did it cost to make Bad Boys 4? Likely over 100 million, but let me ask you, doesn't matter. The real question is, it will make 3 to 4 times that in the box office. That's what I care about. And so I hope you enjoyed this one. This is bringing in ChatGPT competitor Llama 3.1 for free into your web applications. Please let me know if you liked it.